Alrighty. So, we pretty much played every Capcom fighting game that there is. Some of which I played in my past. Some I've just actually got to play for the first time. And so now it is time to rank every Capcom fighter. Starting out with, okay, obviously Street Fighter 2. What is there to say about Street Fighter 2? Iconic fighting game series, like iconic fighting game. Literally the reason why tournament fighters are the way they are today. I don't think any fighting game would be where it is today if it wasn't for Street Fighter. But if we're talking specifically all the different versions and compare them comparatively as far as like playability and all that stuff, vanilla Street Fighter 2 I would still say is like, it's still a fun game, but that one's gonna be smack bang in the middle, only because it just only got outclassed by its much superior updates. Like one of which is Hyper Fighting, which was basically another version of Street Fighter 2, and what they did was that there were homebrew cabinets where they basically sped up vanilla Street Fighter 2. So in response, Capcom decided to make an update to Street Fighter 2 and called it Hyper Fighting, which was the first of the many versions that came out for Street Fighter 2. So for that reason, I'm gonna put Hyper Fighting in the same place, smack bang in the middle, along with vanilla Street Fighter 2. Now, as far as Super Street Fighter 2, that one definitely doesn't have the same speed, and again, it was outclassed by its successor version, which we are about to get to, don't get it twisted. But Super Street Fighter 2 definitely had more content as far as characters go. The graphics were improved from the CPS1 versions of Street Fighter 2. It also had better music too, in my opinion at least. And I'm gonna put that one probably in the A tier. And I also forgot to mention too, we glanced over this, it's my fault. Street Fighter 2, the Champion Edition, was actually the first. That one was actually the real first alternate version of Street Fighter 2. The Champion Edition basically made it so where the boss characters were playable. So that's gonna go in the same place. Hyper Fighting, I'm actually probably gonna... I might actually bump that up to an A because I still actually really like Hyper Fighting. I'm probably gonna bump that up to an A. Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, like, it's Super Street Fighter 2. This is the oldest game to still be played competitively and played at EVO and all that. This game is a landmark in fighting game history. And that is low-key one of my all-time favorite fighting games. So for that reason, I'm going to put Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo as an S-tier fighting game. I think what I might do is that I might bump vanilla Super Street Fighter 2 down here and keep... But Hyper Fighting can definitely stay. Next up is the original Marvel vs. Capcom Clash of Superheroes. That game, honestly, is... And you can even look at the photo, too, of the poster. Iconic. One of the most iconic visuals in the history of fighting games. The Marvel cast staring face to face with the Capcom cast. That will forever be etched into fighting game history as one of the most iconic posters of all time, symbolizing an epic crossover that technically started with X-Men Children of the Atom, which we will get to. But for Marvel vs. Capcom, I'm gonna say that this game is definitely in the A tier. This is a great fighting game that's still fun to play to this day. Probably my only biggest gripe about the game is Onslaught. He's cheapest final boss in the whole, in like in the history of fighting games. Hate Onslaught, but the game is still pretty damn epic with some really damn awesome music. Street Fighter 1. This game has not aged very well. It's an interesting look in the history of fighting games, but in retrospect isn't very fun to play. It's very unresponsive. The moves hardly come out and everything, though the graphics looked really good for its time, and it had some pretty decent music too. I was debating on whether or not if I should put it in the D, but because it has a couple of redeeming qualities to it and the fact that it is essentially what jump-started the franchise, I'm gonna just put it into the C tier. Because without this game, we never would have gotten Street Fighter 2. That is a fact. Now, next up is Rival Schools. If I just say the word Rival Schools, immediately every Capcom fan is like, oh yeah, that game is the tits. Rival Schools was like such a big deal when it came out because first of all, it was in 3D, and not only that, but also it features characters from the Alpha series, more specifically Sakura. Sakura came from obviously Street Fighter Alpha. She was a character in this game, and then eventually Akira would become a guest character in Street Fighter V, and it was widely renowned for its graphics for its time, even though it was outshined by its successor, but which we're gonna get to that. But Rival Schools also had its battle system was very intricate. It was 3v3. It had team assists. You were able to do air combos and things like that. You could sidestep. It's a fun fighting game that I think a lot of folks want to see make a comeback, and I would love to see them make a comeback. Rival Schools, to me, is a great fighting game by Capcom, and I'm gonna put that in the A tier. Next up is JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Now, I gotta make a confession. First of all, I have never watched the anime or the manga, but that's also because I've been watching other anime and all that stuff, so I haven't had the time to catch up to it yet. Give me some time. Stop adding more anime to my watch list, you nerds. Stop it. Anyway, the game itself, though, I think is a well-executed fighting game that runs on the CPS3 system. It wasn't the first, but it was definitely one of the many Capcom games that ran on the CPS3. But it's definitely not the first, but we'll get to that later. The battle system is also like well done. It's very well executed. I virtually have no complaints about JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. For now, I'm gonna put it in the B tier because it's pretty solid. It's a pretty solid fighter. Next up, we have Project Justice. Yes. As much as I love the first one, I just love Project Justice better. Project Justice is just such a fantastic game. Amazing graphics for the Dreamcast. It really showed off what it could do. It took everything that made the first game so great, but made it better. So for that reason, I'm going to definitely place it at a high A tier, right next to Rival Schools. That looks like the original Darkstalkers Night Warriors. I'm pretty sure everyone will be in agreement with me when I say this. Capcom, bring back Darkstalkers. Yes! Bring back Darkstalkers. The original is a solid 2D fighter with an amazing art style, addicting gameplay, amazing music. It all around is a near perfect fighting game that's so much to the point, and this is a huge hot take right here by saying that, near perfect, but I'm willing to say that Darkstalkers, despite not being as much of a familiar or household name as Street Fighter, is just as well executed as Street Fighter, if not better. For that reason, I'm definitely putting Darkstalkers at A tier. So next up is Power Stone. I'm not even gonna lie, this game is crazy. This game drove me nuts, but I can't lie, this game is fun. Power Stone is such a fun arena fighter. Many of the battle arena games I played, arena fighters that I've played, that were similar to this is stuff like Air Guys and Disgaea. Distrega, I'm sorry, not Disgaea. That's the RPG series. What I meant to say was Distrega by Koei. Distrega was also it's a heavily underrated arena fighter by Koei. I played that, and I also played Air Guys, which was actually Air Guys and Power Stone are very similar games. And I guess for the reason that Power Stone reminds me so much of Air Guys is why I'm going to place it very high, but I also love the Stone system. And it has a great art style. This is definitely one of those games where you you know, you have fun playing with your friends and all that stuff. But honestly, I think that's where the sequel would come in. Power Stone 2. Here's my major confession. I'm not as much of a big fan of Power Stone 2 as I am of the first game.
Whoa, 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 whoa.
That's just my personal opinion. I would argue that the fun of Power Stone 2 mostly comes from the multiplayer experience, which I don't think anyone's gonna, like, you know, deny that. Like, anyone would look at this and be like, yeah, it's like you would definitely get more fun out of, you know, playing Power Stone with friends than you are if you were to play by yourself. Which is why I would argue that if I were to compare Power Stone 1 and 2, right? I would say the first game's better if you're looking to play the single player stuff. Power Stone 2 is better if you want like the multiplayer stuff. But as I said before, even though it's more interactive than the first game, I am one of those people that prefers the first Power Stone over the second. That being said, Power Stone's going in the B tier.
Oh my God, who the hell cares?
I am very sure that there's going to be a lot of folks who's going to disagree with me on that. And that's the fun thing about doing these tier lists, is that you don't have to agree with me. But at the very least, hope that you are at least interested in hearing why I prefer the first one over the second one. That being said, Power Stone 2 is still a great game. There's no denying that. Great game. X-Men Children of the Atom. This one was what jump-started the Capcom Marvel crossover. And what a lot of people may have forgotten about is that X-Men Children of the Atom was loosely based on one of the X-Men's biggest storylines around the time when the game came out, called Fatal Attractions. So I guess they kind of did that to coincide with it, but it has little to do with the story to a degree, but it pretty much took liberties when it needed to. But what you get is a combo-heavy fighting game that features heroic X-Men characters and villainous X-Men characters. So characters like Cyclops, Psylocke, and you know, Wolverine with Magneto, Omega Red, and Silver Samurai. You know what I mean? And as someone who is a huge fan of X-Men, I can safely say that this is definitely one of the best games from the 90s as far as like Marvel-based games. And if there's any reason why I'm putting this game only in the B tier, is because it was greatly outclassed by its successors. It was the first of the series, but I still think that this game is very solid and worth coming back to check out. And I do own this game on my Sega Saturn too. Next up is Street Fighter EX. Oh man. So there's 3 of them. Well, technically 5, but it seems like there's only 3 of them, which is fine, because that's more than enough. There's EX, EX2, and then EX3. Now, the first EX game, very solid game. If there's any reason why I'm going to put it in the B tier, is because I actually prefer EX2. I think EX2, more specifically EX2 Plus, was basically the best of the EX games. EX2 Plus had the most characters. You know, as far as graphics go, it wasn't that different from the first game. It was definitely the first time. First of all, the EX series was definitely Capcom's, it was their way of stepping into 3D territory, because it was kind of a thing at the time where every fighting game had to be in 3D, because if they weren't in 3D, then they were oftentimes overlooked. It's like, unless it was either Street Fighter or Fatal Fury or King of Fighters, if it wasn't any of those 3, anything that was 2D fighting games was overlooked. People wanted like 3D fighters, so that was one of the reasons why Street Fighter went 3D during the 90s with the EX series. Street Fighter EX goes B tier because it was overshadowed by EX2, which in my opinion was the better game. And EX3, I'm gonna go ahead and admit it, I don't think it's as good as EX2, but I still think EX3 is a fun fighting game nonetheless. It's definitely on the same level as the first game for sure. Next up is Marvel Superheroes. I mean, bro, it's Marvel Superheroes. So essentially, what Marvel Superheroes was, it was basically what it was to X-Men Children of the Atom. It was like how X-Men Children of the Atom was an X-Men only fighting game by Capcom, although it is important to note that Akuma was a secret character in that game. Because I think Marvel wanted them, they kind of forced Capcom to put him in the game, which basically foreshadowed the Marvel vs. Capcom series. But Marvel Superheroes was a continuation, but this time they decided to add in many of the other Marvel superheroes, like the Avengers type characters like Captain America, you know, Iron Man, Wolverine makes a return, Spider-Man's also in it, you know what I mean? And then obviously the iconic villains like Juggernaut. Juggernaut was also in Children of the Atom. He comes back here, and Magneto's also back, and Thanos is the final boss, and he's also a playable character. You know, he is inevitable. So Marvel Superheroes I would definitely put on the same level as X-Men Children of the Atom, a game that was overshadowed by its successors, but a game that I still think is super fun to play. So that's why it's gonna get a solid B tier. Alright, Star Gladiator. Oh man. Star Gladiator, for those of you who don't know, is basically Capcom's version of Star Wars. I don't think it's the most technical or even the most deepest weapons-based 3D fighter, but I still think Star Gladiator is heavily underrated and overlooked. And it also had a sequel, which was called Star Gladiator 2, or better known in America as Plasma Sword, which is going to be on the Capcom Fighting Collection 2. Both games are definitely really solid to me. I don't really have anything to complain about. And I'm debating on where I want to put them. I don't know if I want to put Star Gladiator in the C. I would say that, like, oh man, this is a tough one. I still think the first Star Gladiator was a great game. It's like, I'll probably put them in the B tier. I think they're both very solid. I'll give the first game a very high C. A very high C. Only because Plasma Sword not only visually looked better, but it also kind of played better, but that's just my opinion. But it's like, I still think the first Star Gladiator is a curious game to check out, for sure. Marvel vs. Capcom 2.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Here's what I'm gonna say. It's a shame that Capcom vs. SNK isn't on here, because those are also Capcom fighting games. Well, I'm actually kind of glad that it isn't, because then some people would have caused a war in the comments. Even so, I still stand by it. Capcom vs. SNK 2 is better than Marvel vs. Capcom 2.
What the hell is wrong with you?
Boo.
You suck!
You suck.
Oh my god, who the hell cares?
But this game is still, I'm gonna go ahead and say it's an S tier game. The frantic nature of the game, actually, you know what? A lot of people are not gonna like this. A very high A.
What the hell is wrong with you?
Let me explain why. The unbalanced nature of the game is admittedly a bit of a killer for me. I've accepted that that's what makes Marvel 2 super fun. However, it's not my favorite Marvel Capcom fighting game. Shockingly. It's everyone's favorite, but it isn't my favorite. Don't worry, I'm about to literally explain what it is. That would be X-Men vs. Street Fighter.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Reason why? Big fan of X-Men. Marvel vs. Capcom 2 very much has everything, no doubt about it. I would say in terms of balance and everything, fluidity and all that, X-Men versus Street Fighter was better. That's just my personal opinion. You don't have to agree with me, but I can definitely see why Marvel vs. Capcom 2 is super lauded. But for me personally, you don't have to agree with me. I love X-Men vs. Street Fighter. I love this game so much. I love it. I just love this game. I love X-Men. I love Street Fighter. This quenches my thirst. Marvel Superheroes versus Street Fighter is gonna definitely be in the same tier as Marvel vs. Capcom 2. Super fun game. It's literally X-Men versus Street Fighter just skinned over to feature the Marvel superheroes as opposed to just strictly X-Men. And then after that, that was when Marvel vs. Capcom Clash of Superheroes happened. If you love X-Men vs. Street Fighter, you're gonna love Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter. It's the same game, just with the Avengers instead of strictly X-Men. Literally, it's a skin swap. Final Fight Revenge. I'm gonna go ahead and say it. This game is dog shit. Pardon my language, but this game is dog shit. Excuse me for cussing. I actually tortured myself playing this game on stream. That was the biggest mistake I ever made. I yawned during the playthrough. That should give an indication of how terrible this game really is. Tech Romancer. I gotta be real with you. I think this game has a fun concept, but I'm not really feeling it right now.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
I guess it's just because I'm not used to playing it. It's like, first of all, I love the fact that you can just run around with the mechs and everything. You have a variety of different weapons and everything like that. The combat feels a bit floaty to me. I don't know why, but it just does. But it's like, there's other people who really like this game, and that's cool. I guess I'm just not really feeling it. It's definitely not Final Fight Revenge terrible, but I would say I would give Tech Romancer a C. I would definitely give it a C. Maybe I'll probably revisit it at some point in the future, and hopefully it'll probably improve on this list, because I would like to come back to this list and update it. But for now, it's gonna stay in the C. Alright, so remember how I said earlier that JoJo's Bizarre Adventure wasn't the first CPS3 game? That's because this game right here is Red Earth. Red Earth, I was debating on whether or not, on where to put it on the list, because Red Earth is a visually impressive game for its time. It's literally nothing more than a boss rush game that only turns into a fighting game when you're fighting your friend or something. But for the most part, it's just a boss rush game. It's okay. Like, I don't think it's peak. I don't think it's peak Capcom. But that's just me. I like it for what it is. I'll give it a high C. I'll give Red Earth a high C. I'm pretty sure some people are disappointed that I didn't give it a B. Actually, you know what? I'll probably give it a low B. Because I think the game is very well constructed, and it has a great leveling up system or whatever. I just wouldn't place it so high. Street Fighter 3. So we're going to talk about Street Fighter 3. I got to include all the versions. Street Fighter 3 New Generation. It's okay. It's nothing more than what you'd expect. First of all, the graphics looked great for its time. I think it was the second game to be released on the CPS3 after Red Earth. And this game was actually, Street Fighter 3 in general was very controversial when it first came out, because it was known and notorious for, infamous rather, for removing a lot of fan favorite characters. You know, Chun-Li and Guile, Blanca, Zangief, all the characters that you would come to know and love and all that stuff. they were not there. In retrospect, people definitely look back on Street Fighter 3 to see what it was really trying to accomplish. And I'm not sure if most people know this, but it was also made by a completely different development team. You know what I'm saying? Because like the team that worked on Street Fighter 2 worked on the Alpha series, which we will get to next. There was a different team that worked on Street Fighter 3, hence why many of the fan favorite characters were different. And it focused on a newer generation, and most people weren't keen on Alex. Street Fighter 3 definitely leaves a lot to be desired, as it's overshadowed by its other versions. For that reason, I'm gonna give this game a high C. I'm gonna give Vanilla Street Fighter 3 a high C.
What the hell is wrong with you?
Second Impact was definitely an improvement, where it featured more characters, and Sean was actually one of the best characters in that game. The gameplay definitely felt a bit better than Vanilla Street Fighter 3, so I'll definitely give it a B. I'll definitely give Second Impact a B. And Third Strike.
Yes!
Bro, I love Third Strike. One of my favorite fighting games of all time. Third Strike definitely gets an S tier. Best music of the Street Fighter 3 series. Had the most characters. It was definitely the most complete. The most fun of the three versions. Which is saying something. Street Fighter 3, literally. And let's not forget Evo moment number 37. The Daigo parry. Enough said. Street Fighter Alpha. I love the Alpha series. Pardon my French, but I fucking love Alpha. Love Alpha. That's all I have to say. I just love Alpha. As far as where I would rank the 3 games, the first game definitely gets a high B, for sure. Because, you know, obviously the later games outshined it, but I still admittedly find myself coming back to playing the first one. And plus, it's the only one where I actually like Dan as a playable character. So the original Alpha gets a high B. If not for the other two, this game probably would have been A tier, maybe even a low S. But that's where I actually have to say that Alpha 2 damn. I'm just gonna say screw it. Alpha 2, actually, you know what? Yeah, I'm gonna give them both S tiers. Alpha 2, gameplay-wise, is better. Alpha 3 has the most content. In a way, it has the most fan service for Street Fighter strictly. Because if you have the home versions of Street Fighter Alpha 3, like I do, I have the Dreamcast version. It also features characters from Street Fighter 2 that weren't in the arcade version besides Balrog through a secret code. Alpha 3 also had an updated version called Alpha 3 Upper, which was released on the Naomi, which was essentially an arcade release based off the home ports of Alpha 3. If there's any reason why I decided to say screw it and put both of them in S tier, is because I just can't pick which ones I would say is just better, because I love them both. Cyberbots. I do think Cyberbots plays better than Tech Romancer, but I don't know if I would put it in the B rank. Because on one hand, while I do think it plays better than Tech Romancer, which is well, you know, they're both totally dimensions of games, so it's not exactly the most fair comparison, but Cyberbots, I just don't know if I love the game enough to say that it's B tier, because I still think it's a fun mech fighting game, but I don't know if I would put it in the B. I would say it's okay. It's a high C. It's definitely a high C for sure. That looks like, I think that's Super Gem Fighter, also known as Pocket Fighter. This game is fun. This game is fun, but it's probably gonna be in the same league as Cyberbots and Street Fighter 3 and Technomancer Starlight, in the sense that like the game is fun. It's more monotonous, more so than most other Capcom fighters. It's clearly one of those games where you have friends and you just go frantic on it. It's literally like you just pick it up and you just have fun. It's not as intricate as other Capcom fighters, but still a fun game to look back on. I will definitely give this game a C. Alright, finally, I should have saved the Alpha Series for last, honestly. Since I talked about Darkstalkers, I should have brought up Vampire Hunter and Vampire Savior. Vampire Hunter, I'm definitely gonna give that game... I'm definitely gonna give it an A, for sure. It's definitely gonna be in the same league as the original Darkstalkers. Because, like I said, I love Darkstalkers. I love Darkstalkers. I don't think any of the games were bad. They were all A's. But my final S tier fighting game from Capcom has to go to Vampire Savior. Easily the best Darkstalkers game. One of the best fighting games ever made. We gotta keep fighting for Darkstalkers revival. I don't care how they bring it back. I just want to see it. They don't have to do RE Engine. They can make it 2D. Like, they could essentially go the same route that Streets of Rage 4 went. Or something like that. Give it like a comic book art style or something like that. That's fine. Just give us more Darkstalkers.
Yes. Yes.
And there you have my tier list of Capcom fighting games. Do you agree with my tier list? Do you disagree with my tier list? If so, let me know in the comments. And also, please be cordial and professional about it. Just know that you do not have to agree with me. This is nothing more than my personal opinion at the end of the day. I just felt like I wanted to share how I would rank these games just based on my personal opinions alone. But by all means, let me know.